Have you ever found something so small, so ordinary, that tore your entire life apart? For me, it was a newspaper clipping from 1983. Just a single yellowed scrap of paper buried under the floorboards of my childhood home. And on it, my name, but the man listed as my father wasn't the man I'd called Dad for 43 years. That discovery, that tiny, forgotten article, didn't just change what I knew about my life. It erased my name, is Colton Fairbanks. At least that's who I thought I was, 3 months ago. I was just another middle-aged mechanic from Duluth, Minnesota, running a dying auto shop, fighting a losing battle with debt, and watching the woman I loved take our kids halfway across the world with another man. I had no idea that everything I believed about my family, my parents, my childhood, even my name, was a story built on lies. And it all started on a freezing October morning. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when a place is more memory than home. Mom's house, the old white colonial on Maple Street. 6 months since the funeral, and I was finally forcing myself to do what I'd avoided: pack it all up. Sell it. Move on. At least that's what I told myself. The realtor said I could get $280,000 for the place. Maybe more if we staged it right. A fresh start, she called it. Fresh start. That money was supposed to buy me time, maybe a lawyer who could help me bring my kids home. Ruby, my 12-year-old artist with her wild imagination and habit of leaving little drawings under my pillow. Jasper, 10, who could take apart a toaster and rebuild it blindfolded. Now they were across the ocean in Lyon, France, living with my wife Melinda and her boss, her French boss, the man she left me for. She called it a better opportunity. I called it what it was: running away. That morning, the frost was already on the windows. The old furnace had been shut off months ago to save money. My breath came out in soft clouds as I climbed the attic stairs, arms full of empty boxes. The air smelled like dust and cedar. The boards groaned under my boots, the same boards. I used to hide my baseball cards beneath when I was 8. Mom had labeled everything up there with her neat, looping handwriting. Colton's school years. Christmas decorations. Walter's tools. Walter Fairbanks, the man I called Dad. He'd been gone. 18 years now. A plumber who worked himself into an early grave fixing. Mrs. Henderson's sink. He was the kind of man who could fix anything, except, apparently, the truth. I was pulling down boxes when my foot punched through one of those old boards. A sharp crack, a puff of dust, and suddenly I was staring into a dark gap beneath the floor. When I reached down to check the damage, my fingers brushed against something. An envelope. Brown, brittle, sealed with far too much tape. Mom's signature move. Like she was trying to keep out more than just air. There was no name on it. No date, just that tape. Inside were 2 things: a photograph and a newspaper clipping from the Moose, Minneapolis Tribune, dated October 15th, 1983. The photo hit me first. A woman, my mother, or someone who looked exactly like her, holding a toddler in her arms. The kid couldn't have been more than 2. The headline beneath the photo made my knees go weak. Prominent businessman's wife and child disappear. The names in the article hit harder than any punch I've ever taken. The businessman was Randolph Merrick, owner of Merrick Development Group. His missing wife, Gwendolyn Merrick, and the child. Colton. Same birthday. Same name. My name. The article said police suspected kidnapping. Randolph had offered a $100,000 reward. He'd spent decades searching for the wife and son who vanished one October night. And in that instant, standing in the dusty attic of the only home I'd ever known, I realized the truth. My mother wasn't Dorothy Fairbanks from Canada. She was Gwendolyn Merrick. and she hadn't been kidnapped. She'd run. Under the clipping was a birth certificate. Official. Stamped. Sealed. Colton James Merrick. Parents: Randolph Winston Merrick and Gwendolyn Rose Merrick. It felt like the floor disappeared under me. Every memory, every story Mom had ever told, it all cracked open. The grandparents who died young, the aunts and uncles we never saw, the move to Duluth for a fresh start. Lies. All of it. She'd erased an entire life and, in its place, built a perfect fiction. A quiet woman from Canada who married a kind plumber, raised one son, kept to herself. Now I knew why she'd never wanted her picture taken, why she guarded the attic like a dragon guarding its hoard. She wasn't afraid of losing the past. She was afraid the past would find her. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room surrounded by boxes, staring at that clipping under the lamplight. Every word seemed to whisper something new, something dangerous. Who was Randolph Merrick? Why did she run, and why? After 40 years. Was I only finding out now? I tried to imagine him. This man who'd spent decades believing his wife and son had been taken. Somewhere out there, a stranger carried my blood. A man worth $240 million. And he had no idea that his missing son grew up changing oil in a failing garage in Duluth. The next morning, Dennis showed up, my cousin, Walter's nephew, and my only real help in clearing out the house. He came armed with beer, sarcasm, and zero patience. "This place always creeped me out as a kid," he said, glancing around the attic. "Your mom kept everything so perfect, like she was afraid to leave a trace." He didn't know how right he was. Every box, every labeled folder, they weren't just keepsakes. They were proof control, evidence management. Dorothy, Gwendolyn, had been covering her tracks for 40 years. No photos before 1984. No letters from old friends. No family heirlooms that couldn't be explained. She'd built a wall around her life. And around me. And now that wall was crumbling. Downstairs, I caught sight of the kitchen. The same kitchen where Walter taught me to fix a leaky faucet when I was 7. He'd held my hand steady as I turned the wrench. "Everything can be fixed, Colton," he said. "You just need patience and the right tools." I used to believe that. But some things can't be fixed. Not Mom's cancer. Not my marriage. Not the way Ruby's voice cracked when she said goodbye at the airport. And maybe not the truth. The truth is never clean. It doesn't sit quietly in an envelope waiting for you to find it. It explodes. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. After that day in the attic, I couldn't stop digging. Old phone books, obituaries, property records, anything that could tell me more about Randolph Merrick. Turns out he was still alive. 80 years old. Still in Minneapolis. Still running Merrick Development, one of the biggest real estate firms in the state. A man who'd never stopped searching for his family. A man who believed they'd been stolen. And now, after 4 decades, he was about to learn that the truth was far worse. The following week, I drove down to Minneapolis. The closer I got to the city, the more the world felt like it was tightening around me, like the life I'd lived was shrinking in the rearview mirror. I parked outside the Merrick corporate building. Sleek glass, polished steel, the kind of place that didn't belong in my world of oil stains and broken carburetors. For 30 minutes, I just sat there. How do you walk into a man's life and tell him you're the ghost he's been mourning for 40 years? How do you tell him his wife didn't die? She ran, and that the son he thought was kidnapped grew up calling another man Dad? My hands shook. I turned the ignition back on, and I drove away. Back in Duluth, I couldn't focus on packing anymore. The house felt alive. Like every creak of the floorboards was whispering, "Find the rest." I went back to the attic. There was something else hidden. I could feel it. Mom had been meticulous. But not perfect. Behind one of the insulation panels, taped flat against the wall, was a folder. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Most were unsent. Drafts written in her tidy handwriting, addressed to one man. Randolph. Each letter told a piece of the story, how she'd feared for me, how she couldn't stay, how the walls were closing in. The words, "They'll come for him," appeared again and again. Who they were, she never said, but whatever she ran from, it wasn't just her husband. It wasn't long before I realized there was more to this than a family secret. Inkim had left clues, hidden layers of her life, tucked between ordinary moments, a storage key taped, inside a book, a safety deposit number scribbled on the back of an old photo, names I didn't recognize. Every discovery pulled me deeper, and every answer led to 10 new questions. Why had she changed our names? Why had she chosen Duluth, so far from Minneapolis? And why had she never told Walter the truth? Or had she? Sometimes I catch myself wondering if Walter knew. Maybe that's why he worked so hard, stayed so quiet, kept his head down. Maybe he loved her enough not to ask questions, or maybe he was part of the lie, too. Either way, the truth was buried in this house, and I wasn't leaving until I unearthed every last piece of it. The day I found the clipping, I thought it was the end of something, the collapse of my entire identity. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because once you pull one thread of the past, the rest starts to unravel on its own, and soon I'd learn that what my mother was hiding from, what she spent 40 years protecting me against, hadn't stayed buried. It was still out, there, watching, waiting, and I was about to open the one door she'd spent her whole life trying to keep shut, because some truths don't stay hidden forever. Not when you were the secret all along, and that, my friends, was only the beginning. Soft, haunting piano fades in. The sound of an old attic door creaks open. A deep breath, then silence. I used to think ghosts were made of memories, the kind that linger in old rooms and whisper in the dark when you're finally alone, but I was wrong. Some ghosts aren't trapped in houses, they're trapped in names. And the one I carried, Colton Fairbanks, was never really mine. It started with a crack in the floorboards. Literally, a stupid accident that turned into the moment my entire life shattered. Was in my mother's attic, the one I wasn't allowed in as a kid. Even back then, I needed permission to come up here. She kept it organized like it was sacred ground. Christmas decorations neatly labeled by year. Tax records stacked in perfect order, box after box, dating back to 1984. Nothing earlier. Nothing before the life of Dorothy Fairbanks began, and that should have told me everything. I was moving a pile of old National Geographic magazines when my foot went straight through the loose floorboard, the same spot where 8-year-old me had hidden baseball cards and stolen candy bars. But when I knelt down to check the damage, my hand brushed something else, something not from my childhood. An envelope. Brown with age. Sealed so tightly it could have survived a hurricane. I didn't even hear Dennis calling from downstairs. "Hey, Colton, you want these old dishes or not?" "Whatever, just box them," I shouted back, eyes locked on the envelope in my hand. It felt heavy, like it carried the weight of everything I didn't know about my own life. When I tore it open, the world as I knew it ceased to exist. Inside was a single newspaper clipping, old, brittle. The ink faded, but still readable. Minneapolis Tribune, October 15th, 1983. The headline hit me like a hammer to the chest. Prominent businessman's family vanishes. And below it, a photo, a woman holding a toddler. The woman looked exactly like my mother, just 20 years younger. And the child? It was me. The caption confirmed it. Gwendolyn Merrick and son Colton missing since October 12th. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I read the article out loud to no one but the ghosts in the room. Randolph Merrick, owner of Merrick Development Group, had returned from a business trip to find his wife and son gone. No note, no trace, no struggle, just gone. The police suspected kidnapping. Randolph offered a $100,000 reward. The article said he was devastated, determined, certain they were taken. I kept reading my own name over and over until the letters stopped making sense. And then, beneath the clipping, I found the proof. A birth certificate. Colton James Merrick. Born May 3, 1981. Parents: Randolph Winston Merrick and Gwendolyn Rose Merrick. The seal of Hennepin County, Minnesota. Official. Real, undeniable. My own birth certificate, the one I'd used my whole life, said I was born in Toronto, Canada, that my parents were Walter and Dorothy Fairbanks. One of those documents was a lie, and deep down, I already knew which one. "Dennis!" I yelled, my voice cracking. He came up the attic stairs grumbling, expecting to haul something heavy. But the second he saw my face, he froze. "What's wrong, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the clipping. He read it once, then again, looked at the photo, then at me. "This is insane," he said. "That woman looks just like Aunt Dorothy." "Because it is her," I whispered. "That's my mother, and that's me." He blinked hard, trying to process it. "But that would mean, Walter wasn't your father." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. Walter Fairbanks, the man who taught me how to fish, who cheered at every little league game, who worked himself into an early grave to send me to college. He wasn't my father. He was just the man my mother found to play the part. Dennis shook his head. "There's got to be an explanation. Your mom wouldn't just kidnap you from your real dad." But what other explanation made sense? The names matched. The dates lined up. My mother had been Gwendolyn Merrick, the wife of a wealthy businessman, until October 12, 1983, and something happened that night. Something that made her run. Imagine this. You're standing in a Paris courtroom. Your heart pounding so hard you can hear it echo against marble walls older than your entire country. In front of you, a judge in black robes is about to decide your fate, not just yours, but your children's. And then, it happens. Your daughter's small voice slices through the silence like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Papa." You look up, and she's running, barefoot, crying, laughing, arms wide open. "Ruby." You barely feel the tears rolling down your face as you drop to your knees. She crashes into you, her tiny arms clutching your neck like she's afraid to ever let go again. Behind her, Jasper follows, 10 years old, trying to look brave, but failing as his shoulders shake. "We missed you so much," he whispers, voice cracking, and just like that, 40 years of pain, lies, and loss begin to dissolve. But let's rewind, because this moment, this reunion, didn't come easy. It was bought with truth, paid for with forgiveness, and carried on the back of generations of mistakes. Phipe was gone, just gone. The man Melinda had gambled everything on, her future, her family, her dignity, was already walking away before the echoes of the judge's gavel had faded. Fraud, lies, scandals across Europe. The mask had cracked and underneath was just another con man. And Melinda, my ex-wife, sat there, staring at the floor, her life unraveling in front of a room full of strangers. I wanted to feel angry. I wanted justice, payback, maybe even revenge. But all I felt was sadness. Sadness for the woman who'd once shared my name, my home, my dreams, who'd run from her own emptiness straight into the arms of a man who mirrored everything she'd wanted to escape. The flight home felt like another lifetime. Randolph, my father, my rediscovered father, had insisted on using his company jet. Said his grandchildren deserved comfort after everything they'd been through. Ruby's laughter filled the cabin. She was exploring every corner, every button, every impossible luxury. Jasper followed, more cautious but just as curious. They looked at Randolph like he was some kind of fairy tale king. This tall, silver-haired man with a soft voice and eyes that had seen too much loss. And when Ruby finally climbed onto the seat beside him, she said it quietly, like testing a word she didn't quite believe belonged to her. Grandpa Randolph. He smiled, gentle, sad, but real. That sounds strange, doesn't it? Yeah, she admitted. We already had a Grandpa Walter. He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. You did? And from what your father tells me, he was a wonderful man. I'm not here to replace him. Ruby, I just hope you'll let me love you too. And in that moment, something shifted. Generations that had been torn apart began to stitch themselves back together, quietly, like a wound healing in its sleep. Back in Minneapolis, life took on a rhythm I never thought possible. Randolph bought us a house, a beautiful colonial, just a few blocks from his penthouse. He handed me the keys and said, "Close enough for Sunday dinners. Far enough that you have your own life." It was the kind of house my mother would have loved. Big windows, a garden full of lavender and oak, sunlight spilling into every corner, the kind of home where laughter could live again. Randolph tried to give me money, of course. He had more of it than he could ever spend. But I refused. I need to earn my way, I told him. That's what Walter taught me. And Randolph smiled. Really smiled. That's exactly what Gwen would have said, he replied. And I saw it then. The pride in his eyes. Not the pride of a billionaire looking at his heir, but of a father seeing his son. With his help, but on my own terms, I bought a chain of luxury auto shops, high-end restorations. The kind of work I'd once dreamed of while fixing rusted Fords in Duluth. Turns out, there's money in nostalgia, especially when your clients have more cash than time. Randolph's connections didn't hurt. Within 3 months, business was booming, but even as success wrapped itself around me, I couldn't let go of the past. The house in Duluth remained untouched, unsold. I'd tried to list it once, but something stopped me. That house was more than old wood and plaster. It was my mother's sanctuary, her hiding place, her proof that safety could be built with bare hands and fear. Sometimes I'd drive up there alone. I'd sit in the attic, surrounded by dust and ghosts, and just listen. To the silence, to the creaks in the floor, to the echoes of a woman who'd given up everything to keep me alive. One weekend, I found more of her secrets, letters hidden behind a loose panel, love letters from Walter to Dorothy, promises written in pencil and trust. He'd known who she really was. He'd known she was running from something dark, something powerful, and he'd loved her anyway. "I'll protect your secret forever." One letter. Said, and he did. Ruby had taken up painting again. Randolph cleared out a space in his office, a corner with a panoramic view of the city, so she could paint while he worked. Her latest masterpiece was a family portrait. Me, her, Jasper, and Grandpa Randolph. But behind us, faintly in the background, she'd painted 2 more figures. Shadowy, soft, almost glowing. Who are they? I asked her one afternoon. She smiled, dabbing her brush into gold paint. "Grandpa Walter and Grandma Dorothy," she said. "They're still part of our family, even if they're gone." Her words hit harder than any courtroom verdict. Kids have a way of simplifying what adults spend decades complicating. Tuesday nights became sacred, just me and Randolph. No business, no lawyers, no plans, just stories. He'd pour 2 glasses of scotch, sit back in his leather chair and ask, "Tell me about Duluth." And I'd tell him, about Walter teaching me to fish at sunrise, about Mom's lavender garden, about the nights she'd double-check every lock before bed. "She never stopped being afraid," I said one night, staring at the city lights outside his window. "Even after Vincent died, she always thought he'd find us again." Randolph's hands tightened around his glass. "She didn't know he was gone," he said quietly. "She probably thought he was still out there, watching, waiting." He took a long breath. You could have protected her, I said before I could stop myself. He nodded slowly. Could I? Then his eyes found mine, sharp, wet, heavy. I had all the money and power in the world, Colton, and I couldn't see the danger right in front of me. He looked down. She protected herself. She protected you. She did what I failed to do. The newspaper clipping that started everything, the one that shattered my world 6 months ago, now sits framed on my desk. Right beside it, a photo of my mother and Walter on their wedding day, and another, Randolph and Gwendolyn before I was born. 3 worlds. 1 family, a web of love and mistakes, secrets and survival. My mother had made an impossible choice. She gave up wealth, security, even her own name, for peace. For a small-town life where danger couldn't find her, she'd found love in simplicity, and she'd built a life that was quiet, but safe. Randolph had made his own journey, from abandoned husband to haunted father to something far greater. A man who'd learned that redemption doesn't come from money, but from showing up. His fortune got my kids back, but his heart made them call him Grandpa. And me, I learned that fatherhood doesn't start with blood. It starts the moment someone chooses to stay. Walter was my father. Randolph is my father. Both. Truth can exist, just like my mother being both Dorothy and Gwendolyn, too. The kidnapper and the protector, the woman who ran, and the woman who saved us. Sometimes the truth isn't neat. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice. Sometimes running is the only way to protect what matters most. 40 years later, I finally understand. My children are safe. They have a home, a future, a family that spans lifetimes. They have the truth. Messy, painful, and real. And that truth, it's enough. Because one day, they'll grow up and face their own questions. They'll wonder about the people in those framed photos. The plumber who raised their father, the woman who changed her name to survive, the billionaire who searched for decades just to hold his son again. And maybe, when they're ready, they'll understand what I finally do. That family isn't just who you're born to, it's who fights for you, who waits for you, who never stops looking. Somewhere out there, someone is still waiting for a call that will change everything. A voice that says, "It's me. I'm alive." And when that moment comes, it won't matter how many years have passed, because love, real love, doesn't keep time, it just waits. She took me, changed our names, and built a new life 3 hours north, in Duluth. I tore through the attic like a man possessed. Beneath that first box was another. Inside, more documents, a social insurance card for Dorothy Fairbanks, issued in 1984, a driver's license. From the same year, a marriage certificate, June 1985. Dorothy and Walter Fairbanks. Every piece was like a building block of a fabricated life. My mother hadn't just disappeared. She'd erased herself and rebuilt under a new name. Dennis paced behind me, muttering, "Your mom never talked about her past." I remember my dad saying how Walter met her at some church event. Said she was mysterious, that nobody really knew where she came from. Mysterious, I echoed. She came from Minneapolis. From money. I picked up the clipping again. Merrick Development Group. Dennis's fingers flew over his phone. Hold up. Yeah. Holy hell, Colton. Randolph Merrick. He's worth $240 million. His company built half of Minneapolis. He looked at me, eyes wide. That's your father. My father. A stranger whose name I'd just learned. A man who'd spent 40 years thinking his wife and son had been taken from him, and I'd been right here the whole time. You have to contact him, Dennis said. And say what? I shot back. Hey, I'm the son you lost in 1983. Turns out my mom kidnapped me. Surprise! He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already sinking under the weight of it, because no matter how insane it sounded, I had to. Somewhere out there was a man who could explain why my mother ran, what she was running from. And maybe, just maybe, he could help me get my kids back, because while my mother had stolen a son from his father, my wife had just taken our children from me. History repeating itself in the cruelest way imaginable. The next 3 days blurred together. Coffee, dust, endless research. I moved my laptop up to the attic, surrounded by boxes and ghosts. Dennis went home, but not before leaving me a six-pack and a warning to eat something that wasn't stale crackers. I didn't listen. I spent hours searching for Randolph Merrick. His name was everywhere. A real estate legend. Started small in the 70s, built an empire by the 80s. By the time his family disappeared, he owned 30 properties. And he never stopped. Even at 76, he was still the head of Merrick Development Group, a titan in glass towers and city skylines. His face stared back at me from glossy business magazines and charity gala photos. Silver hair, strong jawline, eyes that looked disturbingly like my own. One headline stopped me cold. Self-made billionaire Randolph Merrick donates $10 million to Children's Hospital. In the article, the reporter asked him why he focused so much on children's charities. His answer made my throat tighten. Every child deserves to be found. He'd never stopped searching, not once. And now, the missing son he'd been grieving for 40 years was sitting in a freezing attic, wondering if his whole life was built on a stolen name. 17 times I picked up my phone to call Aunt Nain in Phoenix, and 17 times I hung up, until finally I didn't. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm like sunlight through blinds. "Colton, how's the house cleaning going?" "Nain," I said, my throat dry. "I need you to tell me the truth. About Mom?" Silence. I could hear her breathing, slow and careful. "What truth, honey?" I found the newspaper clipping. I know. She was Gwendolyn Merrick. She took me from my father in 1983. Another long pause. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded 10 years older. "She made me promise never to tell you," she whispered. "She's gone," I said. "And I'm about to lose my kids because I can't afford to fight for them. I need to know who I am." I heard the creak of her old chair as she sat down. "It was October 1983, she said quietly. "I was living in Tucson, working nights at the hospital. It was 3 in the morning when someone started pounding on my door. I thought it was a patient. But it was Dorothy. No, Gwen, standing there in the rain, holding you." "What did she say?" "She was terrified, Colton. Bruises on her arms, her neck. You were crying, clinging to her. She said she had to disappear, that you weren't safe, that he'd find you." I gripped the phone tighter. "Was it Randolph? Did he hurt her?" She wouldn't say his name, just kept repeating, "He'll find us. He'll never stop." I wanted to call the police, but she begged me not to. Said they couldn't protect her from him. And just like that, the image of the benevolent billionaire, smiling in front of charity banners, started to crack. "So you helped her disappear?" I asked. "I had a friend in government services," she said. "He owed me a favor. We created Dorothy Fairbanks, a cousin from Canada who needed a fresh start. She cut and dyed her hair, learned a new accent. She was brilliant at becoming someone else, like she'd been preparing for it her whole life. And Walter?" Her voice softened. "Walter was a gift from God. He'd just moved to Duluth from Wisconsin. Didn't know anyone. Met your mom at church. Fell in love instantly. She told him the truth before they married. Said she'd understand if he walked away. But he didn't. He said he didn't care what name she used as long as she let him love her and you." My chest ached. "He was your real father, Colton, in every way that mattered." "I know," I whispered. "But I need to meet Randolph. Honey, no. Your mother ran for a reason. My kids are gone, Nan. Their mother took them to another country. Maybe Randolph can help me. He has money, power. Maybe blood means something after 40 years. Or maybe you'll find out why your mother was so scared. After we hung up, I sat staring at Randolph's corporate website. There was a phone number, an email. So easy to reach out, so hard to find the words. I wrote 20 drafts of an email, deleted every single one. Finally, I picked up the phone. My voice shook as the operator answered. Merrick Development Group. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with Mr. Merrick, I said. It's about a personal matter. Mr. Merrick. Doesn't take unsolicited personal calls, the woman replied. Politely, but she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know that the man on the top floor of that glass tower was my father, and that somewhere deep inside him. He still believed I was out there, waiting to be found, and soon he'd learn that I was, but he'd also learn something far darker, something my mother died protecting me from. Because the truth about why she ran was still waiting in the shadows. And once I started pulling on that thread, there was no going back. You ever make a phone call that changes everything? The kind of call where your hands shake before you even finish dialing, because deep down, you know the world you've built is about to collapse. Or maybe finally come together. That was me, sitting in the attic, surrounded by the ghosts of my mother's lies, holding a newspaper clipping from 1983 that said I'd been missing for 40 years. I thought I'd seen it all, felt every shock I could feel. But nothing prepared me for the sound of the man who picked up that phone. This is Randolph Merrick. His voice was calm, controlled. The kind of voice that built skyscrapers and crushed competitors. But underneath it, I could hear something trembling. This is about October 12th, 1983, I said, my throat dry. Tell him. Colton is calling. There was silence. Just the hum of the line, like the world holding its breath. Then a gasp. My God, he whispered. After all these years, is it really you? My chest tightened. My name is Colton. I was born May 3rd, 1981. My mother was Gwendolyn. Another breath, sharp, broken, and full of 40 years of pain. Where are you? Are you safe? Is your mother? She died 6 months ago, I said. Cancer. The silence stretched again, heavy, suffocating. Then, we need to meet. Please, I'll send a car, a plane, whatever you need. Just come. I can drive, I said quietly. Give me 3 hours. And for the first time in 40 years, he said it aloud. I never stopped looking for you, Colton. Never. The drive to Minneapolis was a blur of highway and adrenaline. Every mile felt like peeling back another layer of my own life. The Merrick Development Group tower rose from the skyline like something out of a dream, or a warning. 42 floors of glass, ambition, and legacy. Everything my mother had run from. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, a woman in a tailored suit greeted me. Mr. Fairbanks, she said. Not Merrick. Fairbanks. As if my mother's name still cast a shadow even here. Mr. Merrick is waiting in his private office. We walked through rooms that gleamed with wealth. Polished floors, panoramic windows, the kind of quiet that only money can buy. Then the doors opened, and there he was, Randolph Merrick, 76 years old, thinner than his photos, his suit a little loose around the shoulders. But his eyes, those eyes, sharp, alive, and shining with tears he didn't bother to hide. My God, he whispered. You look just like her. Like Gwen. For a moment, neither of us moved. Decades of silence stood between us. A lifetime of questions in the space of a single breath. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. His movements were hesitant, like approaching something sacred or fragile. Please, sit, he said, his voice trembling. Can I get you something? Coffee? Water? I don't know what you drink. I don't know anything about you. That hit harder than I expected. The honesty of it. The grief behind it. I just found out, I told him. She never said a word. I was cleaning out her house and found the clipping. About your family disappearing. He reached to the side and pulled out a worn folder. His hands shook. I hired 12 private investigators, he said. Spent over $3 million. Every lead, dead. It was like you both became ghosts. I swallowed hard. We became someone else, Dorothy and Colton Fairbanks. She married a plumber named Walter when I was 4. I thought he was my father. He blinked, processing. A plumber? There was no condescension, only disbelief. Was she happy? Yes, I said. We had a good life. Simple, quiet. But good, then why? His voice broke. Why did she run? What did I do that was so terrible she had to erase us from existence? I studied him. The lines around his eyes, the grief in his jaw. You really don't know. His gaze dropped to the folder in his hands. I've tortured myself with that question for 40 years, he said softly. I loved her, Colton. I loved both of you. I would never have hurt her. He pushed the folder toward me. 15 years ago, I stopped hiring people to find you. Instead, I hired someone to find out why you left. Inside were old police reports. Chicago, 1979. A woman named Carolyn Marsh. Restraining order. Bruises. Hospital records. The name Vincent Cray appeared again and again. Vincent was my business partner, Randolph said. I trusted him. God help me, I trusted him. More documents. Internal complaints. Settled cases. Non-disclosure agreements. A pattern of silence bought and sealed. Vincent had an obsession, Randolph continued, with women connected to his partners. It wasn't about attraction. It was about control. When your mother rejected him, he couldn't let it go. He looked down, shaking his head. She tried to tell me. I thought she was overreacting, said he made her uncomfortable, that he'd shown up at the house when I was gone. But I told her Vincent was harmless. I was building an empire, Colton. Too blind to see the monster standing beside me. I turned another page. A police report dated October 11th, 1983. Randolph's voice lowered to a whisper. She called the police that night. I was in Tokyo. Vincent came to the house, tried to force his way in. She locked herself and you in the bathroom until officers arrived. But he had friends. The report vanished. My investigator found the officer's notes, though. He met my eyes. Your mother didn't run from me, Colton. She ran for you. She thought the system couldn't protect her, not even with my money. She believed Vincent would find her, and the only way to stop him was to disappear completely. I stared at the floor, my chest tight. So she changed everything. She became someone else, Randolph said. Dorothy Fairbanks, a ghost with a new name. And I spent 40 years chasing her shadow. Where's Vincent now? I asked. Dead, he said simply. Car crash in 1992. He never paid for what he did, but he took everything from us before he died. The silence that followed was suffocating. 2 lives stolen by one man's obsession, and decades of misunderstanding built on top of it. Your mother was brave, Randolph said finally. His voice cracked. She gave up everything, wealth, comfort, her identity, to keep you safe. I only wish I'd been brave enough to see what she saw. He leaned forward. You're here now. That's what matters. You're my son, my only family. I couldn't speak. I didn't know whether to feel anger, grief, or gratitude. But when he said those words, my son, something inside me shifted. 6 months later, I stood in a Paris courtroom, not as the lost boy from a 40-year-old headline, but as a father fighting for his children. The French tribunal was marble and history and cold precision. My ex-wife Melinda sat across from me, her lawyer whispering in her ear, her new husband, Philippe, tugging at his collar like a man who couldn't breathe. But I wasn't alone. Randolph sat in the gallery, silent and composed, a presence that seemed to bend the room around him. His legal team, 5 lawyers from 3 countries, stood ready. Every document, every detail of my case perfectly aligned. For the first time, I had power. Not the kind that buys skyscrapers, but the kind that protects what matters most. Melinda's expression faltered as the evidence unfolded. Fraud in Belgium, tax evasion in Switzerland, marriages that began in charm and ended in ruin. Philippe Dean, the man she'd left me for, was nothing but a polished con artist. When the judge's gavel struck wood, it sounded like thunder. Custody granted to the father. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then a small voice broke the silence. "Papa!" Ruby's voice. My daughter's. She broke free from the social worker, running down the aisle, her curls bouncing, her eyes full of tears. I dropped to my knees as she threw her arms around my neck. Jasper followed, trying to act tough, but when I saw his lip tremble, I couldn't hold it together anymore. He pressed his face into my shoulder. "We missed you so much," he whispered. Behind them, Randolph stood silently, his hands clasped in front of him, eyes glistening. The man who had lost his son 40 years ago was watching that same son finally not lose his children. It was a circle, closed, imperfect but complete in its own way. When we stepped out into the Paris air, Ruby clutching my hand, Jasper on my other side, Randolph stood beside me, his cane tapping softly against the stone steps. He didn't say anything for a long time, just watched the crowd, the taxis, the soft drizzle falling across the city. Finally, he said, "Your mother would have been proud. She ran to save her son, and now you've done the same." I looked at him, this man who had once been a stranger on the other end of a phone, and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the relief, another question lingered, because the investigator's report hadn't told the whole story. There were still missing files, still names blacked out, still pieces of that October night that didn't add up. Randolph thought the past had died with Vincent Cray. But in the weeks that followed, as I settled into my new life, a letter arrived. No return address. Postmarked from Chicago. Inside was a single line, typed on yellowed paper. Your mother wasn't running from just one man. And just like that, I realized the story wasn't over, not even close.